There is something that I've been wanting to address more in depth for some time now, and then another clip, I know, went viral of Marjorie Greene being shut down by Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And Wasserman Schultz pointing to the lack of understanding on the part of MTG, as MTG is leading in this effort to attack NATO. Right now, within MAGA, it's very popular to be against some of these key international alliances that the United States is leading within, one of them being our NATO alliance. And so I'll play this for you. It's a sort of long clip, but you'll see Debbie Wasserman Schultz eventually jump in there and nicely shut down the nonsense of MTG. Then we'll go through Trump echoing some of these talking points about other countries not paying up. And that's why NATO maybe isn't a good thing for the United States to be in. And if they're delinquent, we're not going to protect countries if they're invaded, etc. We'll go through examples of that. Then I'll walk through just how stunningly misinformed or dishonest people like MTG, Trump, and a bunch of the MAGA leaders who lie about NATO, how it even functions, are. So here's the clip, then we'll discuss further.
My amendment strikes funding for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, Security Investment Program. My amendment would strike over $433 million in NATO funding from the bill. America should not be doling out hundreds of millions of dollars to international organizations to help them fight their enemies, especially when they are unwilling to fight for themselves. NATO. But yet America is beyond our pledge. We are spending in 2023 3.5% of our GDP. But yet we don't do anything to defend our own country and our own borders. This is why Americans would love to see Congress take action to defund NATO and stop spending hundreds of millions of their hard-earned money to foreign countries to defend these foreign countries while we don't defend our own country and our own people. Madam Speaker?
I think the sponsor of the amendment has shown pretty clear evidence that she has no idea what the NATO Security Investment Program is actually funding.
You startled me. Goodness gracious. I guess since you're here now, I'll ask that you subscribe to the YouTube channel by clicking that subscribe button if you want to help us continue to grow.
We're talking about funding that is provided to build infrastructure that takes care of our troops that are overseas so that we can make sure that we invest properly in infrastructure for a vast array of training facilities, of national security facilities, of hangars that contain our airplanes, military aircraft that cost billions of dollars. So everything about what the amendment does actually makes our own service members who are fighting overseas to defend our national security interests and to defend our country less safe. I'm not sure if the sponsor of the amendment has traveled to see our military infrastructure around the world. I have, and oftentimes when we go as the MILCON VA subcommittee, and I've traveled with Judge...
And I'll stop it there, but you get the point. And the particulars of this are interesting, but there's a broader topic that I want to get into, and this more represents yet another example of clearly, as Wasserman Schultz revealed, MTG not really knowing what she's talking about, but also there's a broader opposition to NATO, partly founded on a misunderstanding, or at least that's justification for the attacks against the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a defensive military organization, as I'm sure you're aware, that has served the United States greatly and has helped to stabilize the world in many ways, but is being undermined, which is something you can sort of expect given the ideology, not just in this country, but the right-wing ideology that's aligning with the sort of MAGA type across the world. But here's a couple examples of Trump saying this story.
If we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
Right? So that made a bunch of news. Wow, oh my gosh. But then some people might say, well, yeah, if countries aren't paying, they're not paying their bills in NATO, then why should we be obligated to abide by the treaty? Here's another example, then I'll answer that question.
Yes, the right way. I remember during a meeting, one of the presidents of one of the European countries stood up, and it was a closed-door meeting. He said, may I ask you a question, Mr. President? Yes. If we don't pay, we're not paid up, and we're attacked by Russia, will you defend us? I said, you mean you're delinquent? You haven't paid? That's right. No, I will not defend you.
And actually, let me play you one more example just to underline how clever and how interesting he finds this anecdote to be.
You got to pay up. You got to pay up. Like you're supposed to. One of the leaders said to me, does that mean that if we're attacked by Russia, that means you're not going to pay us? You're not going to defend us? I said, are you telling me you're delinquent? That's a real estate term. Are you delinquent, like delinquent on your rent? Are you delinquent? Yes, if we don't pay. I said, no, we're not going to protect you. The next day, billions of dollars started pouring in. It was sort of amazing. If you said the other, why would they do it? And that's what they've done for years. But now they're talking about a different level of war. Now they're talking.
So I've said before, as we sort of skimmed over this, the thought on essentially, even if what they were saying was true, it wouldn't make sense because it's not established in the treaty that not paying means that no longer does Article 5 apply. So even if what he was saying was true, this would be a ridiculous stance to have. We start not fulfilling our obligations based on treaties that we've signed, especially one as crucial as NATO, and things fall apart very quickly. But I haven't taken the time to break down for you all why it's so absurd that they frame it this way. Because it's not at all a situation where countries aren't paying their bills to us, so we're having to pick up the slack and they owe money to us, and so they're delinquent, as Trump so cleverly put it. And here's from Roll Call a little bit of this, then I'll respond further. That's not how NATO works. James Golger, a former dean of the School of International Service at American University, who currently teaches at the university and sits on the State Department's International Security Advisory Board, told us in an email, there is a common budget that countries pay into, but most of what we think of as NATO defense spending refers to individual country defense spending and preparedness to be able to operate as a military alliance. So essentially, in the NATO specifically budget that you could pull into, there aren't really issues with paying because there's algorithms they have to calculate what different countries, based on their size, based on different metrics, should be paying into the budget. But that's the small, not what Trump's referring to. What he's referring to, and people not paying up, is you're supposed to be putting in, it's a 2% guideline, 2% of your country's GDP, not into NATO, but into your own defense spending, your own national defense spending. And the idea is that if we're a part of this organization, then each country should be investing in their military preparedness so that if ever Article 5 has to be invoked, then the countries are able to act correctly and in a way that is impactful. And if only the United States, for example, had a strong military, then that sort of defeats the purpose. So the idea is everyone is making huge investments in their military preparedness. Everyone's investing properly in their defense so that they have a strong enough military if ever the horrific situation were to happen where NATO goes to war. So it's investing in your own national defense, and it's not a requirement. These are guidelines. So we aren't being owed money by countries because many of them aren't paying that 2% guideline, but we've seen increases in how much these countries are investing. And then the United States pays, as you heard Marjorie Taylor Greene reference, somewhere above 3%, maybe even 3.9. Poland pays 3.9. Estimated the U.S. would spend about 3.49% of its GDP on defense in 2023, second only to Poland at 3.9%. So even Trump saying we spend the most per capita, that's not true. But we do spend more than most other countries on our own defense. Does that mean that we're picking up their slack? No, that's because we vote for big defense spending bills. Marjorie Taylor Greene votes for huge defense spending bills. And I am actually someone who is, in a general sense, for strong military, investing properly in our national defense, while understanding we definitely waste some of these investments and should cut the waste. But yes, let's have a strong military. Let's invest properly in our national defense. And us going above and beyond on that front. Doesn't mean other countries should be kicked out of NATO or are delinquent in some way. So she doesn't even understand. Trump doesn't even understand. This isn't a bills that haven't been paid situation as they portray it to be. Instead, it's, hey, everyone try to get up to paying 2% of your GDP on your own national defense so that the strength of NATO is undeniable. The United States, for a very long time, for a bunch of reasons, partly because we're the world's sole superpower, invests way more than most countries, except for Poland, in our national defense. And that's a decision that people like MTG, in a vacuum, say they're okay with. She says Biden hates the military, even though he is for increasing investments. And it's been Republicans so often, like Tommy Tuberville, showing their willingness to hurt our military. But the confusion helps to strengthen the narratives, unfortunately. People are confused about these subjects, so then people like MTG can get away with nonsense talking points, or Trump. So it's been clarified. You've been duly notified. And let me know what you thought of all that in the comments. You can become a member by clicking the join button below.